Welcome in, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about whether or not you should be pulling for the best worst dad in FFBE, Raegan. I'll go through the highlights of his kit and we'll discuss his strengths and weaknesses, and we'll even do an AI test and look at his use on the JP server. That way you know exactly whether or not you want to grab a Raegan for your own account to run around with units like Laswell and Velis and Zoma? Does anybody have Zoma? Let's start with that AI test, and we're going to be looking at what buffs he uses first. So here's the first turn that we get, and he's going to go ahead and he's using the Leave This To Me, the elemental resistance buff. This is a great buff because elemental resistances are very strong mitigation. Of course, it's limited to specific elements, but still very important for various matchups. So he also has, he's on monk sub for this the friend character that I was able to find. So we'll see on his second turn, he's going to use his courage skill, which also has his AP consumption down. And we can fast forward to his final skill. There it is. We can rewind that a little bit. He is going to use Store on the Monk sub job, which is a massive attack boost as well as a defense penetration boost. So that's the order. Those are the only TP skills he had on. He did not have his TMR on, or I can't remember which TMR it was, but it was a TMR that didn't have an ability. Now, if we want to take a look and see if Raegan's all by himself, does he actually change his buff order? Well, guess what? He is not going to. He's going to go ahead and use that elemental resistance buff once again. And when we fast forward to his next turn, he's going to go ahead and he'll make sure, let's see here, if it's going to, there, he uses his courage buff again. So he just has the same order. He's always going to be putting up his resistances before putting up his courage. I hope you enjoyed the AI test. Next, we're going to talk about Velis's damage, his durability, and his utility. So starting with his damage, he has all of the things for the most part that you want to see, including 60% innate slash resist pen and 60% defense penetration. And now he gets 40% from his passive for both of those, and his sword also gives 20% of each innately. And you could use another skill of his, which will give him another 40% for 3 turns for defense pen, getting him up to 100%. We also have the Snow VC to get even more defense pen. If you're not getting it from the skill, it's kind of overkill at that point. But really, he has high penetration values, and he has 6 different chaining skills. So really, he can deal a ton of damage. He also has a defense break. We have a slash attack resistance penetrate, or sorry, imperil on his limit burst, and he has also protect and shell removal. He has multiple attack types in that he also has the strike attack on his monk sub job. It's not the best sub job around. Really, the only thing that he's missing for damage is going to be an elemental imperil, and more importantly in my eyes, a barrier break. Now, because he has chaining skills, it kind of makes up for the barrier break, but again, it doesn't equate. It's not quite as good as a barrier break, because the barrier break, you just do your max damage. The chaining skills, you will have to, you'll break the barrier in 1 turn, but you're not going to kill your opponent outright because of that. So then when we talk about the durability of Raegan, he is quite durable in a lot of ways. He's got very good strike and slash resistance, and he's got very decent HP as well. He does have AoE resistance on a buff, but he doesn't have any innately besides that. So that's a bit of a flag, but otherwise, he's got the under 50% self heal that we see is so important. He has 2 uses of courage, and he has elemental chain resistance on his kit, but also on his VC, so he can stack it pretty high. He also has a 70% counter, which has a 70% chance to reduce strike and slash damage by 20%. So all in all, his survivability looks to be pretty good. He doesn't have that AoE resist in large amounts, but still all of the other factors there really means that when he takes on specific attack types like strike or slash, or when he takes on specific elements like wind, ice, and dark, he is going to be very strong against them. And then when we get into utility for Raegan, he has courage removal, he's got healing power down in multiple areas on his kit, and he also has counter chance down as well. He has a specific dispel, so that is the haste and refresh. He has a 100% hit, but it's on his surge strike for his monk sub, so it's a low range, low damage skill, not really the 100% hit that you'd like to see on him. But the good news is that he has both acquired AP up and AP consumption down innately on his kit, so it means that he is going to have good AP management. He also has a sword that gives him the same CT up at 20% or less HP that King Bradley has, so that's a really nice boost to be able to stay in a fight. As for Raegan's cons, there's only a few. The no barrier break is going to be a pretty big one for me. I think that's quite important to take out several good units right now, including Sephiroth, including when you fight dark teams, just those super sterns that you see. He also has low damage and range for his 100% hit, and basically what that means is that his best accuracy setup is going to forgo the extra slash and strike resists, because you're not going to take off the penetration skill. There's just too much going on his penetration skill. So you'll have to take off the slash and strike resist passive, and just to get that Nightblade passive to get the 25 accuracy. And if you don't do that, then you're going to have trouble against evade setup. So it's a little bit of a weakness for him, but it's not like it's not like he has terrible accuracy. It just takes away his durability, or at least part of it. And the final thing is that he only has that AoE resistance on an active buff. It means it can be dispelled, and then he has 0 AoE resistance. And I thought that was kind of odd, but then again, he does have a lot of other ways to mitigate damage. So I think that he's more matchup dependent than someone like Hio, who, if he has a tank, can actually survive quite a few hits, especially if his heal goes off. Whereas with Raegan, against certain matchups, he's going to be way better than Hio at surviving, you know, in a lot of ways, but won't be as good against certain types of damage that are AoEs as Hio might be. So when we compare Raegan to other 100 costs, I'm going to use King Bradley and Stern here. Stern is more comparable because he's not limited. Bradley was a very pushed unit. You can see that Raegan has similar levels of HP, that he has decent attack, you know, not as much as those other two. He can go higher if he has that Nightblade passive on, but the 37% slash resist and 32% strike resistance, those are really high innate to go into a battle, and then maybe you have equipment on or whatever it is. That's really good. You know, like his agility is at a good spot at 67. His HP is pretty decent at 4,411. He really is overall a good unit. The main thing that he's missing is going to be that accuracy and the barrier break, but really compared to these two units, he's got a lot going on in terms of being able to survive a little bit better than both of them. We can also talk about Raegan's VC. It's pretty solid for him for sure. It has the 10 AoE resistance on the unit effect, which is very important. There's agility on it. It goes into that elemental chain resistance. It gives it to the whole party, which is great, but it really stacks it for him, but also even more slash resist. So when you have this on him, all of a sudden he's at 57% slash resistance, and he's got some crit damage as well, because he does have 24 innate crit chance. So this is a very good VC for Raegan, but it also works on King Bradley. It also works on our new Stern. There's a lot of different units that can use this. It's honestly a very interesting VC if you plan to use this sword red mage job, which is a very supported category, so definitely should be considered by a lot of different people. Then I do think this is one to pick up, just because slash resist is very good in general, but also elemental chain resist. Even though it's a small amount, it's not a crazy amount, every little bit counts, and this adds to everybody's survivability. So I do really like this VC, specifically for people pulling Raegan or going into Howlet, going into these other sword red mage category units. I should actually mention that there is a global buff for this vision card. So we're getting slash attack up and accuracy up for Raegan and Rain. So this is a big deal, because depending on how much accuracy they give, for example, if they give 25 accuracy, that's the same as his passive, and it kind of mitigates that weakness that I was talking about. And if it's more than 25, then all of a sudden, you know, we're in an even better spot than we thought we could have been if you get the vision card. And even if you do use the vision card and the passive, it's all the more accuracy for when you're specifically targeting evasion units. So this is a really good buff. The slash attack is obviously very good too, but the most important thing here is that they did give some accuracy on this VC for those of you that will be using it in a team with him. As for equipment for Raegan, his TMR is nothing too special. I mean, he does have a nice little bit of HP and defense on there, but otherwise the ability is just, it's okay. It's definitely good for a new player to get 40% attack, 25 fire attack, 25 ice attack. It's just not an ability that you're going to get to use very often. It's not something you want him to use over his other skills. So it's just a fine TMR. It might be pretty good in PvE as well. And, you know, if you're new, it's definitely something you can use on him. but otherwise, because it's cloth, you know, instead of an accessory, that is a kind of a deal breaker. So it's not the best TMR that we've seen in a while. It's okay. Raegan's farmable sword, however, the Blue Glacier, is very, very, very good. This sword, which you might want to build in the crit version, or you could build it on the assault version, but honestly, the crit version with 26 crit puts him up to 50% crit rate. You know, this sword for him specifically, and also actually, I mean, for any fire or ice unit, is nuts, because it gives you both defense and slash resist penetration. So that saves you a slot, you know, to get that from some other source. And it can save you 2 Trust Stone slots, which is really good. But it also gives this, when conditions are met, the auto cast of the CT up. Again, this is not just for Raegan. This is for any fire or ice unit that uses this sword, and there are a lot of sword wielding units, so it's very, very interesting, and it's something that, you know, I'm going to start looking at what other units I have on my account that might actually be able to use this. I think there's also maybe some world where you could, you know, be fine with the penetration that he has, and you want to use the blood sword maybe to go into this like full self-healing mode, but I don't think that's like totally viable necessarily, but it's kind of would be kind of fun because he is bulky and because he can do lots of damage. You know, it would be a really fun idea to test out. Don't know if it's viable. All right, so next we're going to take a look at the numbers on the JP server in terms of how many people are using Raegan. Now this is just a snapshot at a certain range of time of how many people are using them, basically, you know, within the last, you know, few months. And we can see this graph here on attack on the left and defense on the right. So we can see at the peak on attack, you know, he was in 67 teams on this day. You know, over on this peak, he was used in 69 different teams. Nice job, buddy. But then, you know, more recently, we're looking at 47 teams used in the top 50 guild battles. You know, 44 teams featured a Raegan. Just the other day, 48 teams featured a Raegan. On defense, just the other day, 21 teams featured a Raegan. At the high point, there was 41 teams that featured a Raegan. So these are the kind of numbers that we're seeing here. So in the top 50, he's not being used a ton. And then when we go ahead and we look at another unit, so here's top 50 for Stern. So right in the, you know, the most recent range, 244 teams on offense and 238 teams on defense. And so obviously those are way bigger numbers. Bradley, 277 on offense, 214 on defense. And that was just on the last, you know, that's just one single day, but you can see that the line is generally around that point there. And then Sephiroth, which we're in a dark meta in JP right now, 405 on offense and then 693 on defense. So you can see again, the line is like fairly steady in that range, you know, going between 500 and 400 on offense and 800 and 600 on defense, or even 650 really on defense. So what we're seeing in JP is obviously a ton of lightning being used, and then we're seeing these other 100 cost units, Bradley and Light Stern. We're seeing a lot of them, you know, compared to just in JP, we're really not seeing a lot of Raegan. So we can scroll down in warthevisionstats.com here, and we can see what type of teams are being used by various people here, and there's a lot of mono ice teams on both defense and offense, and there's a few interesting teams here. Like if we go into the defense team side of things here, Velis first is very common because you don't necessarily know there's going to be ice behind Velis. The fact that we see a team, you know, with Ferris in here, we see a Sephiroth led team with the Raegan and Howlett behind it. You know, those are interesting teams. There's not a lot of them, of course, but then on offense, very, very common is just a Velis, Raegan, and Howlett. So Howlett's coming out very soon. He's also a 100 cost ice unit, and that seems to be a very popular pairing. They are the same job type, so Howlett and Raegan are both that red mage sword job type. We also see a Velis, Alaya, and Raegan. That's something that people could be building immediately on Wednesday. And then of course the, you know, the archer chicks here, the ranged ice chicks, Eliza and Alaya, and then Raegan there, and then some mixing in with Snow as well. So pretty typical teams from what you'd expect. Nothing really flashy happening out of Element, at least not at this point. All right, with that, we're coming to the end of the video. I hope that you enjoyed it. It was a fun video to make. I am pretty tired. I'm doing this one very late. I had to work late today, so you know, I'm going to bed right after this. But I think that you know, Raegan is a very solid addition to the Ice Cast. He's got a ton of value as a unit that has power and durability. It's hard to get both of those things. So that is definitely really good. He does suffer against evasion. However, Now, you know, with the global VC upgrade, if you're going to use that VC and not ice VCs, then he might very well be, you know, decent against evade. We'll see. And then barriers can be a trouble for him as well. But even if they have really high slash resist, which is not that common, but you know, there's Ed and Al that come to mind. You know, he has 60% slash resist, but it's not like he's getting up to the 100% that, you know, certain units might get up to. So if you run into barriers, if you run into very, very high, not high, but like very high slash resist, then those might be counters for him. And then otherwise, they're, you know, things that aren't slash and strike are definitely going to be stronger against him as well. So watch out for that missile. Watch out for some magic stuff, even though he doesn't have terrible resistances. And then of course Pierce too, you got to watch out for that. But for the most part, he has a lot of different things on his kit that give him survivability against a big chunk of the meta. He's definitely going to be very durable, and that is honestly such a huge part of being a successful unit in War Divisions. So now the question is, should you be pulling for him? And honestly, even though like it's not to do with how little we're seeing him in JP, it just could be a unit that didn't get pulled that much. Doesn't mean he's not good. In War Divisions, there's a lot of units that can see plenty of play if people put the time into them. But I still have to be in the business of recommending when people save or when they pull for things. And you know, for the most part, I'm saying, and this is such a popular character too, but I'm gonna have to go ahead and say I think this one is a skip unless you are a hardcore ice fan or you're seriously wanting to dive into the sword red mage category. But if you're not like very specifically in that category, then I think it's better to save, because we have Final Fantasy VI coming back. We have Final Fantasy V on the horizon, and there's just lots of other units coming out, obviously, as they do in War Divisions, that it's tough to pull on a 100 cost when he's not going to be absolutely breaking the game. So I'll give you an example though. Like I pulled for Hio, and I would say that people had a very similar opinion in terms of just, not that they're similar units, just that they're similar. They're not going to break the game, but they're solid. And guess what? I'm having an absolute blast with Hio. He's one of my favorite units to use that I've ever had. So you can have a ton of fun. And I use him in guild battle. I use him in CM, all this stuff. So he's a good unit. And so Raegan will be too. He's just not going to be a Bradley. He's not going to be, you know, a Sephiroth. And that's important that you know that. So otherwise, I'll be back soon enough with some more videos and hopefully a special collab soon with another YouTuber. We'll see how that, you know, comes together, hopefully this week. Otherwise, I'll see you all soon in another video. Thank you so much for watching.